through model railroading, designing, building, and operating model layouts from the very modest to the most elaborate. Enthusiastic modelers like these have been practicing the hobby in a serious way since the early 30s. What is it that attracts so many people of otherwise divergent interests to this hobby? There's something for everyone. If you like to work with your hands, you can build models from scratch. If you like to figure things out on paper, you can design layouts. If you're naturally inquisitive, you can study and learn and share your knowledge with others. Or you can simply enjoy the camaraderie that is an important part of this growing hobby. There's room for all. You don't even have to own a train to share in the pleasures of model railroading. There's no disputing the fact trains are an object of affection the world over. They bring out the child in some. In others, a sense of romance is rekindled because trains are associated with travel, and travel represents change of pace and freedom from routine. To most, trains strike a note of nostalgia. To watch a scale model replica of a passenger train in operation reminds us of an age when life was less complex, when the pace was less demanding. Model railroading as a hobby has flourished since a group of 71 pioneer modelers founded a national organization in 1935. On Labor Day of that year, the National Model Railroad Association was born in Milwaukee. There was a common desire then, as now, to keep the spirit of railroading alive, not only in America, but wherever rails run. There was a more fundamental reason for establishing a national organization. The need for standardization of flange and wheel dimensions, third rail location, and other technical factors affecting the interchangeability of model railroad equipment. What emerged was a standard which was closest to actual scale and that which represented the majority of equipment then on the market. Manufacturers adopted the standards, and the hobby has enjoyed a robust growth since, as has the NMRA. Since its founding, the association has attracted as many as 30,000 members. Besides providing a unified voice on technical standards, the NMRA has served to encourage excellence within the hobby and to give those with common interests an opportunity to display and compare projects. There's yet another ingredient in the NMRA success story: active promotion of the hobby. Far-sighted association leaders recognized that fewer young people would be exposed to the mystique of the iron horse as many railroads faded from the scene. These leaders concluded, and wisely so, that to promote model railroading to an international market would require a permanent headquarters with a professional staff. In 1983, that vision was fulfilled. 48 years after its founding, the NMRA moved into its present headquarters in Chattanooga, the design of which is reminiscent of the boom days of railroading. Within the 10,400 square foot red brick structure, the association now has abundant space to expedite its daily operations, to properly house resource centers, such as libraries for member use, and ample space to expand services to meet the growing needs of its membership. The headquarters staff is efficient, cheerful, and dedicated to providing professional support. It is equipped with the modern tools to stay on top of the job. Computers, laser printers, mail handling equipment, and other facilities to properly inventory and distribute member materials. Most orders are filled the same day they're received and shipped by the best mode to members around the world. UPS makes a daily run by headquarters to expedite package handling. Data banks classify the membership by zip code, the scale in which members model, birth dates, and other pertinent facts. To NMRA, members are more than a number. Each has an identity. It's not unusual to be greeted on a first-name basis when making an inquiry to headquarters. One of the most valuable resources within the headquarters building is the 5,000 square foot A.C. Kalmbach Memorial Library. Initially funded by the Kalmbach Publishing Company, publishers of Model Railroader and Trains magazines, the library contains something for everyone. Currently, the library contains 350 magazine titles and 25,000 back issues. $1,500 books, $12,000 slides and negatives, $4,000 scale drawings, 1,000 microfiche, 100 tape slide clinics, $100 videos and films, and all computer cataloged for easy access. Chattanooga was an appropriate location for the permanent headquarters since the area is steeped in railroad history. The acre of land for the facility was conveyed to the association by the Tennessee Valley Railroad Museum, NMRA's next-door neighbors. If your timing is right, you can step out of the headquarters when you hear the whistle and watch the train make its turn alongside the headquarters building on one leg of the Y. The TVRM's Grand Junction Depot on the adjoining property is one terminus of the museum's special 6-mile train ride. Outside the depot are a number of historical exhibits of motive power and rolling stock. Inside this replica of an early 1900 station, you'll find a gift shop which stocks myriad railroad items, a snack bar and deli, model railroad exhibits, and a ticket booth for purchasing one-way or round-trip museum train tickets. Courteous personnel are ready to provide information and assistance on your tour of the shops and the museum. Don't miss the ride on the TVRM train. It'll carry you back in time to experience some rare moments in history.
Tickets, please.
Those romantic days of early railroading. Along the way, the TVRM train will carry you over some of the most beautiful terrain in the Deep South. If departing from the Grand Junction Depot, the trip begins by crossing high above the Chickamauga Creek, made famous by the Great Civil War Battle of Chickamauga. The entire line is listed in the National Register of Historic Places. You also cross 3 other bridges. Travel through the 1,000-foot Missionary Ridge Tunnel, the only active horseshoe-shaped tunnel in Tennessee. It was finished 6 years before the Civil War and was an early target of General Sherman prior to his march to the sea that led to the burning of Atlanta. At the end of the short, relaxing ride, you'll arrive at the East Chattanooga Depot. Here, the museum's Discovery Trail begins. You and your family can explore a real railroad yard on a self-guided or conducted tour. Being a real service facility, on this day, no less than 3 steam locomotives were being repaired and restored by volunteer workmen. If you think model railroading is tough, try this kind of hobby work in your spare time. Before the return trip to Grand Junction, the train must be turned. This is accomplished by the museum's 80-foot-long turntable. Day, the train was pulled by RS-1 8669, but inquire about the dates of the steam excursions. If you really want to go behind the scenes, take a tour of the DeButts Yard of the Southern Railway in Chattanooga, now part of the Norfolk Southern system. Though this facility is not open to the public, special arrangements can be made through the authorities on the ground. This is a huge classification yard where trains are constantly being broken apart and made up for points within and outside of the Norfolk Southern system. It is also a major storage facility. Speaking of storage, anybody need a caboose? Engine repairs and maintenance work can be done here, including painting. Right out of the box. In addition, minor repairs on bad order cars is done here in the DeButt's Yard car shops. Want more? Come along then for a ride up Lookout Mountain's famed incline railway, referred to as America's most amazing mile. It's the steepest passenger incline railway in the world, climbing more than 1,000 feet to an altitude of 2,100 feet above sea level at a grade of 72.7% to the top of Lookout Mountain. The view through the windows and glass roof is magnificent as the incline passes near the site of the famous Civil War Battle Above the Clouds. An engagement fought on a day when clouds prevented Confederate gunners from seeing to support their comrades on the slopes below. Point Park is just a short walk from the incline station. The park is maintained and operated by the U.S. Park Service. You'll find a number of monuments here honoring those who fought and died in the war between the states. You can browse through the many Civil War relics and enjoy the serene and beautiful surroundings. Perhaps the most enjoyable moments on your trip to this historic city will be those spent at the original Chattanooga Terminal Station, which has been converted into a hotel complex, now called the Chattanooga Choo-Choo. Inside, you step back into a world of Victorian elegance as the nostalgic surroundings recall the glorious days of the city's railroad heritage. The main waiting room and other terminal areas have been transformed into restaurants, the largest of which seats 1,300 visitors under and around what was once the tallest freestanding dome. Terminal Station is now the permanent home for history's best-known train, the Chattanooga Choo-Choo. A night aboard the Chattanooga Choo-Choo will be an unforgettable experience for the entire family. 48 Victorian family suites have been created from tastefully restored passenger train cars. 325 more conventional hotel rooms are also available. An old-fashioned electric trolley shuttles visitors around the half-mile track circling the complex. The personable conductor makes certain there's never a dull moment.
I'll give you first chance at her.
The well-maintained grounds are simply gorgeous. within the complex is varied and plentiful, from candy and toys to ice cream to glassware to contemporary fashions. It's all there, including, of course, an abundance of railroading collectibles. Ah, just my size. A chapter in the history of America's railroads is dramatically expressed in the Choo-Choo's giant model railroad display. Built and maintained by members of the Chattanooga Area Model Railroad Club, the operating layout consists of a model of the Chattanooga Terminal and Union stations. The total direct distance between terminals is 175 feet, making the exhibit one of the world's largest model railroad layouts. In all, the layout covers more than 3,000 square feet. It contains 100 locomotives, over 200 cars, and can operate 6 trains at once on a total trackage of some 100 scale miles. The model was started in 1973 and, like all model railroads, will be under continuous expansion and modification. If you're a model railroader, a trip to Chattanooga should be a must for you and the family. The beautiful scenery of southeast Tennessee, its natural wonders and colorful history alone are worth the trip. Add to that a full measure of train memories and fresh experiences, and you've got an unbeatable vacation combination. Be sure to include a stop at the NMRA headquarters. These friendly folks want to get to know you better.
Ahead introduces the Northern Railcar Wheel Shop, Gil Reed, railroad artist, an operating session at Kalmbach Publishing, and Why Do We Love Trains? Hello, I'm Chuck Zahner, and I'd like to personally welcome you to Tracks Ahead. This series is designed as a magazine format, and as you probably already have guessed by the title, we're going to talk all about trains, and that's trains with a capital T. Now, we don't want to devote each and every program to just simply full-size trains or model trains or any single anything in between. So what will we offer? Well, we're going to offer all of it. Full-size trains, model trains, publishers, authors, artists, railroad history, museums, military railroads, trolleys, and tourist lines as well. In short, everything concerned about trains. And at the same time, I'd like you to meet some of the people who have made all the aspects of railroading such a popular and integral part of today's society. But before we get started, let's take a look at that love affair all of us have had with the railroad. What is it about trains? Just what is it that makes some people love to watch them go by and makes others devote their lives and hobbies to inanimate pieces of metal covered with oil, dirt, and grime? Could it be that the dirt is from distant places and the train represents far more than just a smelly, noisy obstacle to our passage down the highway? Or do they represent a radical departure from the ordinary in our lives, the opportunity to experience the thrill and excitement of travel? Trains have always spelled romance, danger, travel to distant places. They have spoken of mysteries, dashing men, beautiful women, and the luxury and, well, class of a world known only to a very privileged. The train, or perhaps we should more rightly call it the railroad, has played a major role in the development of civilization. Before there was any interstate road system, long before trucks and automobiles and minivans, electronic fuel injection, there was the railroad. The concept of a nation linked by steel was established in Britain around the early 1800s, simply because the British industrialists saw a way to make money through the rapid delivery of goods and services to metropolitan centers. Businesses could also use the lines to move unheard of amounts of material and personnel to distant areas. They could speed communications between trading ports and mercantile centers, and that all spelled money. But while the railroad also moved goods between developed industrial centers, it also played a major role in the development of the frontier. The railroads often bought huge tracts of land and then built a rail line through it. The land was sold to homesteaders who were clustered around the rail line and depended upon it for shipment of cattle and produce to market, and conversely for the delivery of manufactured goods to make their lives less harsh. The railroad also was a workhorse used in mining and timber to make a path into areas that were previously inaccessible. Mountains were crossed, gorges were spanned, hardships were overcome so that paths of steel could snake to the horizon. As the nation was covered by a spider web of silver rail, the railroads became our lifeline, carrying the mail, cattle, baggage, soldiers, war material, fruit, coal, steel ore, raw material, and finished goods, from market to consumer, to producer and back. Danger, travel, excitement. That's what the railroads came to mean. The engineer was a kind of a god, master of the monster that opened up new horizons, the man whose eyes actually saw the towns over the distant hill, and who lived with the danger of weather and moving machinery. Who hasn't heard the whistle of a late-night train and wished that they weren't up there with the engineer, going somewhere? More than anything, the railroads came to identify with travel, new places, and all the romance and excitement that accompanies it. The railroads have been a part of our liveliest folklore, our music, and our heritage. So why? Why trains? Why did children of 70 years ago, as children of today, want to wake up on Christmas morning to a sparkling train under the Christmas tree? Psychologists would analyze this as a good fantasy instrument, the device whereby the child could exert control, starting and stopping and throwing switches to make different paths and making imaginary people and loads get on and off, just like the real thing. But it was more than that. It was the mastery of power and the imaginary opportunity to travel. And children, like myself, begged to be taken to the railroad station on a nightly basis just to see the trains. So what is this love affair? The man who can explain love may discover the answer. But until then, I guess those of us involved in this matter will have to content ourselves with watching the trains going by, or modeling the real railroads and pretending, or putting our eyes down the track and wishing that we were in charge of that thundering demon, moving into the horizon to some distant escape of our common lives to danger, travel, intrigue, and romance. The deregulation of the railroad industry has served as a motivating impetus for some of the private sector companies of the American railroad scene. One such company enjoying this opportunity is the Northern Railcar Corporation of Cudahy, Wisconsin, one of a handful of companies nationwide which offers complete freight car, passenger car, and locomotive servicing. And let me assure you, their craftsmen here can perform any type of duty from routine repairs up to extensive restorations.
Northern Railcar originated with John Gruby and Greg Reistad talking with Bill Gardner, who's the owner and founder of the company, about the possibilities for rebuilding private railroad cars for various companies, including railroads, around the country. And this all occurred in about the middle of 1986, and Bill, working with Greg and John, came down and found this building and purchased it and started doing the conversion of the building to a car shop for passenger cars. Then the business grew into freight cars and wheel shop work. He purchased the Milwaukee Road wheel shop, and it was down in the Menominee River Valley from the Sioux Line Railroad, and brought all the machinery out here, built a annex for that machinery, and now we produce wheels for freight railroads and locomotive wheels too. Ed Warner can tell you how the division works and the products that they make.
The function of Northern Railcar's wheel shop is to provide usable wheel sets to the railroad industry. When a wheel set comes into our shop, it is inspected to determine the scope of work that needs to be performed. One of two things will happen to that wheel set. It may only need to have a machining operation done to the circumference of the wheel. We will do that and put it back out to be used underneath a freight car. Or it may need to have the wheels demounted from the axle and go through a complete reclamation process. When a wheel surface needs to be recontoured, we load it into a special lathe set up for that purpose, and we machine the outside of the wheel circumference to make it round again, and we restore the flange area of the wheel to a full flange contour, which is the same contour that a new wheel would have. After we do the turning on the wheel, we have to make sure that the circumference of both wheels is the same, that the flange contour is proper. After a few more checks, we put roller bearings on the end of it, and the wheel set is ready to go back into service. When a wheel set is inspected and deemed to have scrap wheels on the axle that are not reusable, then we must put the wheel set through a complete reclamation process. This process involves the first step, which is demounting the wheels from the axle. The wheel set is pressed or is dropped into a below ground hydraulic demount press, and the wheels are demounted from the axle. The wheels are sent to a scrap container. They're not reused again. The axle is fed down a gravity feed rack where it goes to an axle lathe station. It is chucked up in the lathe. The axle is measured dimensionally, cleaned, and a skim cut of metal is removed from the wheel seat surface, which is the area that the new wheel will be pressed back on. From there, it goes into an inspection station that we call a MagnaGlow station, and what it is final dimensional checks are made there, and the sizes of the wheel seat area are recorded, and a magnetic particle solution is used to inspect the axles for any potential cracks or flaws which could endanger the life of that axle while in service under a freight car. After it's passed all those tests and it is satisfactory, it is fed down a gravity feed rack to the wheel mounting press. Next to the wheel mounting press is a vertical boring mill. We have taken new wheels that we buy from American manufacturers, and we bore a finished size hole in the center of that wheel to match the mate axle, which is at the wheel mounting press now. The wheels are fed down and the mate wheels are matched up with their axle, and they are rolled into a wheel mounting press. The wheels are pressed on, and we must press them on equal distance to the center point of the axle, also to a pre-measured and specified back-to-back distance. We must keep very rigid recording diagrams of every wheel set and every serial number. We keep those on file as required by the AAR for 5 years. Each wheel set is mounted within a minimum and a maximum parameter of what can or cannot be put out of this shop. When satisfactorily mounted to the prescribed pressures, the distances are correct, the wheel set is pushed out of the wheel demount press and it rolls down the track to a hydraulic bearing mounting press, where reconditioned roller bearings are applied on the ends of the axles. After the roller bearings are applied, we check a running lateral to make sure that there is sufficient free play in the bearing, that it will not get hot. We put an end cap on, which is the end cover, and torque it up to a specified foot poundage, and we stamp a locking plate on the end of that end cap with our shop letters or initials, which identifies that product as coming from Northern Railcar's wheel shop. When this is all done, there's a final inspection made. The wheel set is taken outside and put in the inventory and loaded onto one of our trucks when a call comes through from a customer.
How would you like to have a job that lets you work on your hobby every day? Well, most of us aren't really that fortunate, are we? But in Milwaukee land, a truly unique and state-of-the-art model railroad has been established by the employees of the Kalmbach Publishing Company. Oh, you know, the people that give us Model Railroader magazine and a host of other related publications. It's called the Milwaukee, Racine, and Troy Railroad, or the MR&T for short. Now, this fascinating model railroad has been established for the express purpose of the employees and as a vehicle for testing and development of brand new railroad products.
We began building the railroad in 1976, and it took several years for it to come to the state of completion where it would support this realistic operation simulation that you're going to see tonight. We started operating in 1983, and we've been at it ever since. During a typical operating session, we compress a 24-hour day into 2 hours by using a clock that runs 12 times faster than a normal clock. Our railroad is much shorter than a real railroad, and in order to make it seem like a meaningful operating session, we speed up the clock to make it seem as though we're running longer distances. The group has a terrific amount of enthusiasm. We started operating almost 5 years ago now with a core group of 26 people. The group has grown a little bit up to a total of 30, and in the 5 years we've only lost one member. He had to move out of town. The group was first formed in 1983, and we did it by advertising that we wanted to start such a group. We had a model railroad open house here one weekend and posted signs around the room asking people to sign up and become part of the group.
The reason we use the non-Kalmbach employees, or the people who don't work here, is that because we're trying to run this like a real railroad, we need more people to do it than we can get out of the employees themselves. So we invited these local model railroad groups to join us, and they get to come in and run the railroad with us, and we get to work with them and get to know them. It's worked out real well. Instead of using a prototype timetable as a guide, we have to make something up on our own, since the railroad itself is freelanced or imaginary. So what we're doing is trying to run trains in a logical fashion to do the kind of business that we're trying to simulate with the different piggyback trains and unit trains, as well as the local business. We think of the MR&T as being a point-to-point system connecting Milwaukee with two big western transcontinental railroads, the Burlington Northern and the Santa Fe. We run southwest generally from Milwaukee. If you were to ride the Amtrak City of Beloit out of the Milwaukee passenger terminal, You'd leave and pass through the towns of Hales Corners, Big Bend, McWanago, Lake Beulah, Troy Junction, Winter Hill, Williams Bay. You'd end up in our off-layout or hidden staging yard called Rockford, which represents the west end of the line and all points west. We're about ready to get the operating session started, so let's join the operators.
Well, welcome back to another operating session on the MR&T. You guys look around the railroad, you'll see some new things here. If we've got some guests tonight, we want to make sure you answer their questions. We've agreed that we'll meet on the 26th of next month, so I'll turn you over to Andy to tell you how things are going to go.
The main new thing I wanted to tell you about tonight was the Milwaukee Union Station will be operating the Amtrak train out of that. When you back the engine down to pick it up, you need to be on the back track there, track 1. When you come back in, going the other way, the train should come in on that same track. And you can uncouple the engine right at the far end of the station. There's a hidden uncoupling ramp in line with the wall. That should be about it, so let's get going. What we do next is the operators go to the call board and they sign up for the different trains and jobs. They pick out the trains that they want to run or the switching jobs that they want to have for the first trick or shift in the operating session. And then everybody moves off to their first job positions. The dispatcher checks when everybody's ready and starts the clock and announces that the operating session has started.
Dispatch, this is WBS.
Go ahead, WBS.
I need the main line here at Winter Hill to do some switching.
Okay, WBS, you're clear to switch on the main line, but stay clear of the passing track switch. Amtrak 337 is on his way.
I understand Amtrak's on his way.
Amtrak 337, this is dispatcher.
337.
337, you'll have to take the passing siding at Winter Hill to meet the WBS. He's switching on the main line.
Right, take the passing siding at Winter Hill. 337 out.
Dispatcher to CXE.
This is CXE.
CXE, you'll have to stop holding the main at Winter Hill to meet the TTW trailer train.
I understand. Stop at Winter Hill to meet the coming trailer train.
TTW, this is dispatcher.
TTW.
TTW takes siding at Winter Hill to meet the CXE on the main line.
Siding at Winter Hill to meet CXE.
Extra 1009 East, this is dispatcher.
Extra East.
Extra East, once you've met that TJT train at Lake Beulah, you're clear to Alice.
Right, after the meet out, clear to Alice. Out.
TJT, dispatcher.
This is TJT.
TJT, give me a call when you're in the clear at Lake Beulah there.
I've cleared him now.
Thanks, TJT.
Our operators enjoy trains so much, they like to participate in their operation, which they can't do any other way but with model railroading. So we get the group together and we take jobs that we normally wouldn't get to do, like engineer and dispatcher and yardmaster, and put the railroad through its paces, make the trains do what they're supposed to do.
Model railroaders come from all walks of life. They are bound together by a common interest.
I'm Father Dave Hopkins, and I come here on Wednesday nights once a month to participate in a club that has an operating session, which simulates the pickup and delivery of cars to different kinds of industries as part of that action. One of the reasons I'm here is because it is a total opposite kind of a thing that a clergyman might do. It does help us to deal with a little bit of stress, to do something as recreational as model railroading. A lot of professionals find that model railroading does give them a release from some of the day-to-day problems that they face in their occupations.
I'm Wayne Case. I'm a senior systems analyst at Design Computer Systems, and I come here once a month to run trains. It gives me a chance to, in this case, I'm running a piggyback train which you normally see run through a town at 80 miles an hour, and it's fun to do.
My name is Gordy Spearing. I'm a salesman for a local paper company. I enjoy coming and operating on the layout because I don't have to do any electrical work or scenery. It's just a fun time to come down here and mix with some of the other guys interested in model railroading and to operate on the layout, like a prototype.
Okay, that went pretty well. Anybody have any problems tonight?
We got a little problem with some dirty track at Winter Hill.
Yeah, we've got a lot of dirt on the layout out there. We're working on the Troy and Northern, of course, our new branch line over there, and that makes a lot of dust. I hope we'll get that cleaned up. Maybe by next time we'll even be operating it for you.
Sounds good.
Kalmbach Publishing, who publishes Trains Magazine and Model Railroader Magazine as well, offers a unique opportunity to individuals who are bound together with a desire to run a model railroad in a most prototype fashion. For the past 19 years, Wisconsin railroad artist Gil Reed has been regularly commissioned for that annual Amtrak Kellner. Gil is well known on both the national and international level for his outstanding renderings of railroad art. On a visit to his Wisconsin Elm Grove studio, I talked with Gil about his art and his recollections about that golden era of railroading.
I'm working on a watercolor of a Pennsylvania Railroad K2 type locomotive, which means not very much to anybody unless they're interested in railroads. So what I try to do when I do a watercolor is to put some human interest into the picture. And this particular scene shows a locomotive fireman waving at a crossing watchman as he leaves Richmond, Indiana. Now, Richmond, Indiana was the town that I grew up in high school when I was a kid. So as a result, I would go down to the station as many times as possible and take pictures of trains and try to get a ride on the switch engine. Now, this is a watercolor, and what I'm doing is a hit-or-miss system of watercoloring by blocking out areas so that if I happen to spill or smudge anything, why, it isn't going to hurt the picture itself. And here, of course, the fireman has not really begun to work yet, simply because he already built up the fire. But what I'm doing, as you can see, I've got a light coating of blue here on his shirt. I worked some green around the windows. Now I'm going to come up and work on his hat, a little more blue. Most railroaders had Oshkosh Gosh type of overhauls on. Well, we're going to try to finish up around the fireman's shoulder here, darken the area so that there'll be a contrast from the inside of the cab to this fireman and his cap. He's actually leaning out the window and the sun is coming over from the right. So what I'm doing right now is just more or less blocking him out. We'll even use this dark color to set up his hat. Putting in his goggles. Usually they were rather cumbersome, but they did the job, keeping the cinders out of the eyes. Now, in order to get this thing to a point where you might see how it will look, I'm going to take the masking off. And as they say in France, viola.
Gil, your formal education, Miami University of Ohio, the prestigious Chicago Academy of Fine Arts.
Well, that's right. But I didn't completely finish in the Chicago Academy of Fine Arts because the Call the Iron Horse was after me, so I went to work in the Cicero, Illinois, the Glen Yard Roundhouse of the Chicago and Alton Railroad. That didn't last very long because they put me on the extra board, so I never knew when I was going to work and when I wasn't going to work, and I began to see it's more fun to paint pictures of trains than to really do the work.
You know, something that comes to mind, you've done 17 calendars for Amtrak. You must have a few favorites.
I do. Probably they may not be agreeable with everyone else, but they're all my favorites, you know, because I've always wanted to paint railroad calendars like Griff Teller, the famous Pennsylvania Railroad artist. So my choice is the 1975 calendar called Amtrak on the Move. And it's a night scene, shows the 4-track corridor of the old Pennsylvania Railroad between New York City and Washington, D.C., showing 4 trains filling every track and busily moving along with the locomotive in there, never even been finished yet. I had to figure out how to make it look. And, another one was 1979, the Amtrak's National Limited going around Horseshoe Curve. Horseshoe Curve, again, the Pennsylvania Railroad springs to my mind. A 4-track main line that's going up and down these terrific mountains. And there it is, on a slab of concrete, one of the forerunners of the diesel trains, the Pennsylvania Railroad K4 locomotive. I love that picture. Then, in 1983, why, I did Hellgate Bridge, which is outside of New York City. The background, I moved about 9 miles so we could get the Chrysler Building in the picture. But in that picture, too, along with the brand new AEM-7 electric locomotive, was this GG1, the Pennsylvania electric engine, the 5-striper. Amtrak started out with those engines, but they had to get rid of them because they had PCB count in there, and you know what that does. I've had a lot of fun doing this. The one thing that I feel is that steam is gone, but the diesel power is here, and the tradition goes on. The railroads are great. They move on time. Sometimes they're a little bit late, but that's the way it goes. And if I can just get people to see the thrill of railroading, I've all done my part.
Well, that's it. And like I promised, something on full-size trains, model trains, and something in between. But we couldn't conclude this program without a special feature. I don't think there's a single one of us out there who at one time or another hasn't put his or her eyes down the trackside to see that toy train come rumbling past. And out of those, who hasn't secretly wished they weren't the engineer? Well, thanks to an old name in toy trains, the Lionel Corporation of Mount Clemens, Michigan is going to afford all of us that opportunity. The firm has introduced RailScope, a miniature television camera placed in the nose of 3 of their most popular locomotives so that you too can have a chance to see exactly what the engineer would see as your train makes its way throughout your model empire. Well, that's it. And I hope to see you next time on Tracks Ahead, when once again we'll have the opportunity to take a look at the color, excitement, and history of America's railroads.
In our 480 main power feed lines, we're able to replace those if need be. We were also able to make such repairs as diaphragm replacements, seat change-outs in a car, baggage rack modifications, repair end doors, and that type of items here at 14th Street. After the train has been inspected and the bad orders set out and the good orders in, the train's removed from the inspection house, placed in the yard, where we have a crew of sheet metals workers, electricians, carpenters, and coach cleaners. They get on and they service the train, such as cleaning, wiping windows, emptying ashtrays, vacuuming the cars, cleaning toilets, watering the train, supplying it with paper goods. The carpenters go through and repair door latches, seats, place broken windows. Electricians go through and check refrigeration and make repairs to air conditioning and heating, lighting if need be, minor repairs out in the yard. Our sheet metal workers or pipe fitters, they repair water leaks, check our toilet systems out, and go through all the air, all the water systems on the cars, and drain and flush the water tanks when they're needed. The carmen on the outside, they hook up all the air hoses and do a train brake test on the consist and hook up the baggage cars to the road engines. And the electricians also cable up all the 480 cables, and the train's ready to go.
The 16th Street Diesel Shop is the largest diesel-electric locomotive passenger facility in North America. Our 200 employees work in various crafts to perform the daily, periodic, and heavy maintenance on locomotives. A locomotive arriving for daily maintenance typically is fueled and sanded and then moved over a pit where it is inspected mechanically to ensure compliance with FRA and, more importantly, stricter Amtrak standards. While the locomotive is over the pit, the lubricating oil levels in the engines, air compressors, generators, traction motor support boxes, and journal boxes are all checked. The unit's running condition is monitored. Laborers clean the cab for the engineers, and after ensuring that the locomotive is fit for service, it is moved outside the facility, given a final check by an electrician, and dispatched for daily service. If any defect has been noted on the locomotive that would prevent it from being used in daily passenger service, the locomotive would be sent to the back shop for repairs. Our back shop is equipped to handle changing out generators, air compressors. We do truck repair, which would include changing out a traction motor, a journal box, coil springs, suspension. We repair generators, water pumps. We can change out on the engine anything from a cylinder head or a piston to a complete power assembly. Our back shop is also the center of periodic maintenance for 178 Amtrak locomotives, which are removed from daily service on a 45-day basis, where Amtrak and FRA required inspections are performed. We also have a wheel truing facility where wheels that do not meet Amtrak or FRA specifications can be trued to the proper contour. The bottom line is our back shop is equipped to handle any type of repairs a locomotive could possibly need.
At this commissary facility, our primary objective is to assure the freshness and the quality of our product to the traveling passenger. We receive our different products from vendors throughout the country and from within the city. They arrive at this facility, and from this facility, they are distributed to our different storage areas. We have a cooler area, we have a barroom area, and we have a third floor area. The cooler area naturally is for perishable items, the barroom for our liquor, soda, etc. Our third floor area is for our non-consumable or our non-perishable items. From that point, the way that the stock is put onto a train is by a commissary worker, which he works off of a worksheet, which he picks items for a particular train. This goes on all three different departments. At the end of the day, these three areas all marry into one central location and become one train. We work here at this facility one day ahead. The next day, these items are then inventoried by an onboard person, which reports to our commissary. He inventories and assures that he has the proper amounts and counts of whatever products are needed for his diner or lounge or cafe car. At that point, after he's through with his inventory, we then load these supplies onto a commissary truck. From there, we deliver these items from our commissary dock onto the train itself in the yard. At this point, then the onboard personnel properly store and display the product, and at this point now the train is ready for departure.
This facility is presently receiving 50 additional new coaches which were purchased from the Bombardier Corporation. The need for these coaches has been brought about by Amtrak's steadily increasing passenger counts. Each year, the number of persons traveling Amtrak has increased, causing us to maximize the use of our equipment and now finally increase our equipment fleet. In addition, the increased use has brought about increased maintenance. We are now in the process of completing the construction of 2 additional wheel truing machines at this facility. As you can see, we are very optimistic about our future, for the American public has rediscovered the train.
The Milwaukee County Zoo has been operating a 15-inch gauge zoo train since 1959. 3 steam-powered coal-burning locomotives pull trains around a 1.25 mile loop of track and truly give those zoo visitors a chance to experience the golden era of steam train railroading.
The Milwaukee County Zoo began operating its train here at its present site in 1958. The train was made possible through a gift from the Milwaukee Journal Company. The train itself, the first year, operated in August, September, and October. We hauled that first year just over 2,000 people around the zoo. Since then, the zoo has carried over 14 million riders. Approximately every year we haul around 350,000 riders. The zoo operates the train from Easter until the end of October. We operate on a daily basis, weather permitting. During the summer season, we'll operate 2 trains daily. The Milwaukee County Zoo train operates at a profit. We generate about $270,000 in gross receipts. From that, we net around $70,000 each year. The profits from the operation of the train get first plowed back into the maintenance of the train, and then what's left over goes for the purchase of animals here at the Milwaukee County Zoo and some construction projects. The hospital here at the zoo was built from train funds, as was the major portion of the children's zoo.
The Milwaukee County Zoological Society possesses a railway that was developed in the early days in the 1870s in England by Sir Arthur Haywood at Duffield Bank, and Parliament confirmed it as the smallest public railway in the world. This is the only steam public railway running in the United States on daily service, and it's right here in Milwaukee. The locomotives that they have are the American class, the Atlantic class, and the Pacific class. They draw open vestibule clerestory coaches of the turn of the century, and the capacity of the train of each coach is 12 passengers. The engines carry about 150 pounds of steam. They're reciprocating engines, as all locomotives of that caliber and time were. They're not superheated. They're saturated engines. And the metals, the railway itself, was developed by the county engineers and the society and myself and the Milwaukee Journal. The maintenance of this railway is carried on by a private contractor as well as zoo employees, and it's generally what we call running repairs. And constant vigil has to be maintained on the brake apparatus, on the boilers, the engines, and the metals, the switches, everything that pertains to the running of this railway. We have a diesel with a Waukesha diesel engine in it, a diesel hydraulic, which is via mechanical, and that's under repair because it has given us many, many years of long service, and we're in the process of now replacing the prime mover part of the unit. We have coach repair that we do quite frequently on woodwork, and oftentimes when coaches have been used so much and for so many years, it requires a tremendous amount of wood repair and canvas repair and glass repair and even some metal repair.
Once leaving the station, you cross one of the 2 bridges on our trip. As you go through a heavily wooded area, you'll catch a glimpse of our new Peck Welcome Center, our great ape facility, and then if you look off to your left, you'll notice our feline building. As you go further along on the trip, you'll notice such animals as the elk and the caribou, and then you'll come to a large lake, which is called Lake Evinrude. On this lake, you may catch a glimpse of trumpeter swans, Canadian geese. As the trip goes, you'll pass over a wooden trestle here at the zoo and catch a glimpse of our Dow Mountain sheep, our Alaskan brown bears, and finally, animals from Australia, such as the kangaroo and the emu. As the trip nears completion, you'll catch a glimpse of our children's zoo before returning to the station to unload. The zoo train is so popular because they represent something that the normal zoo visitor doesn't get to see very often. The zoo trains, being steam-powered, represent a bygone era that their grandparents remember, or maybe the parents even remember. The trains are special to the Milwaukee community. They're special to the people who work here. I like to think of them as just another attraction here at the zoo, just as popular as any one of our animal exhibits.
Milwaukee native Ed Green, like most of us, discovered that wonderful world of toy trains in his early childhood. Today, Ed Green's collection has products by Lionel, American Flyer, Marx, Marklin, and Bing. And Ed thoroughly enjoys doing research and writing about those old toy trains as well.
Toy trains to me are fascinating, I think primarily because of the nostalgia. As Hemingway so aptly stated, every man has a mistress and her name is nostalgia. And I think this is one of the factors that most people collect. They remember things from their youth, things that were very pleasant. And it's kind of a historical document, really, that is preserved in a toy. Originally, toy trains came out back in probably the 1830s, and primarily in Germany and some of the European countries. They came out of thin paper for the poorer youngsters, and even in silver and some flat materials like that. Later, following prototype design, we would have cast iron, which was a very popular and very durable material. However, it didn't have enough detail, really, and it was superseded by other designs later on. Clockwork was a very popular type, made, as the name implies, made by clockwork manufacturers, and keyed with a large key on the side. We have some nice examples here, both made in Germany. This large locomotive tender and cars made by Marklin, a firm that is still active today, and the brothers Bing made this one, as you can see, for the English trade with the name Victoria emblazoned on the side. That also tends to date the train as being around the turn of the century. It's interesting that the designers concentrated on the locomotive and tender, and the cars are minuscule in size, very tiny. The clockwork locomotive was popular, endured for a long time, and in cheaper sets up until even present time. The simultaneous use of power in the form of electric power came in early manufacturers, and here's a good example in cast iron made by the Ives Manufacturing Company with a kind of an interesting side door caboose that is somewhat rare. And other manufacturers were, of course, the popular name Lionel in this large standard gauge locomotive. The number 33 here was a very common locomotive and was made for many years, spanning the World War I period and on up into the 20s. Other manufacturers, of course, were American Flyer, which later on was taken over and absorbed by Lionel. Ives, the very popular name, again became a Lionel product. And Dorfan, very nicely made locomotives. They had a material called, was supposed to revolutionize the toy industry. It was called Dorfan alloy, but being a die casting, it tended to revert to its original state and crumbled and was not a very durable material. As a result, they're very rare to find a locomotive that in completely mint condition today. Accessories, too, are a big part of the toy train layouts, and to have a complete unit, one must have signals, as in the prototype railroads. This very nice one here, made by Frank Hornby, has a very simple movement, but it's very positive, and it runs very nicely. Another little one here is our little express man. Interestingly enough, made with a large, heavy counterweight that spins and activates the little guy to walk here. I guess as a museum man and an educator, I'm mainly interested in the philosophy of collecting. Back to from the beginning of time, probably some caveman, rather thoughtful, would collect a variety of colored stones, arrange them in an interesting manner, show them to his fellow men, and they would ponder and wonder about them. Later on, collectors, Ptolemy, Plato, Even Franklin Roosevelt, our late president, was a renowned collector of stamps. It seems that stamp collectors and collectors of toys, other memorabilia, a variety of hobbyists seem to be better educated. They have more interest in the world about them. They it's a very satisfying, complete hobby that gives one a pause to reflect and enjoy.
Bob Schwab of Greendale, Wisconsin's O-gauge scale model railroad features an interurban line with single and double track main line and serves a number of small communities in southeastern Wisconsin. Bob has been interested in model railroading since 1936 and considers the hobby a complete hobby that not only challenges the hands but the mind as well.
The inspiration for my model railroad really comes from my experiences as a boy modeling and riding, and I've used the Milwaukee electric lines as an inspiration for my layout. It has city running with streetcars, and it also has interurban running from town to town. The principal city on the Northern Electric lines is Cream City. It's been modeled after a typical Midwestern fairly large city, which was generally the hub of an interurban system and also afforded some city streetcar running. The Northern Electric Railway and Light Company interurbans enter Cream City by way of Grand Avenue, passing Trinity Hospital, the library, the Schrader Hotel, the Galloway Building, an old-fashioned drugstore, and then it turns a typical corner in front of two golden domes of St. Salsomar's Church. It then proceeds onto Delaware Avenue and past the row houses, which are a recent addition to the layout. The layout really changes from week to week, and I've added as much as I can in the time that is allowed to me to do this. The cars then continue past the row house and make a left turn onto 4th Street, and then once again appear on Grand Avenue, going to the left of the Schrader Hotel, making a loop around the city block, and then entering the interurban terminal. Some of the city streetcars also follow this same route and load and unload at the Northern Electric Terminal, which is located, of course, downtown. Once the interurban is loaded, it leaves the downtown terminal, travels through the city streets, and then out into the countryside through the most important and main junction, North Junction on the layout, and then continues out into the country to South Milwaukee. One of the most fascinating and intriguing facets of the hobby is hanging the overhead wire. It looks complicated, but it isn't really. We try to model the prototype as much as possible in that we actually do get the power to our models from the overhead wire. We use 24-gauge phosphor bronze wire that is manufactured for us, and it's hung from hangers closely resembling the prototype, and we also use the wooden poles, much as the prototype did. In the cities, we use representations of steel poles, again, much as the cities did. The models on the Northern Electric lines are a combination of scratch-built models and kit models. The majority of them are scratch-built. The material I use the most is styrene. I also use many commercial parts, as many as possible really, to finish the models, such as poles and fittings that we have on the underbody. Expansion on the line will include service to the powerhouse, to the car barn at the edge of town, and to the distant city of Watertown. Like most model railroads, the Northern Electric lines will never be finished.
Well, that's it, and I hope to see you next time on Tracks Ahead, when once again we'll take a look at the color, excitement, and history of America's railroads.
Funding for Tracks Ahead is provided in part by the Kalmbach Publishing Company, publishers of classic toy trains, Trains Model Railroader, and Trains Illustrated.
In our busy lives, we can always tell what time it is just by checking a clock. But animals have their own natural sense of time. When to be born, when to feed, when to get a move on, and when to die. The rhythms of their life cycles are truly wondrous, and we'll see some pretty amazing transformations as a variety of beasts, bugs, and birds make sense of the world around them with their own super sense. Next time on Nature.
Tonight at 7.
For millions of years, it endured. Untouched, remote, pristine. Antarctica, a frozen land at the bottom of the world. But now all that's changed. Man has descended on Antarctica, using it as a unique science lab, searching its icy crevasses for clues to the past and future of our planet. And as nations vie to stake their claims to this frozen landscape, the world's environmentalists are sounding an alarm.
The reason that they're there is simply because they want to see the Antarctic saved from a fate that's befallen every other wilderness.
Can man work in harmony with nature without ruining the world's last pure wilderness? Journey to the end of the earth for a haunting exploration of this spectacular continent. Antarctica, a presence on the ice.
Tomorrow night at 9 on Channel 16.
Tom Wolfe and Mary Gordon on The Fate of the Novel.
I'm not saying you cannot have a good, limited story. You can.
And you're going to say that a simple heart is limited.
Compared to Madame Bovary, it's limited.
What makes you want to use that kind of language?
Stephen Ambrose on Richard Nixon.
I think that he would have had no Watergate to deal with. If he had gotten us out in '69, if he did this.
Stephen Jay Gould on Evolution.
If you could replay life's tape from the beginning, you get a very different set of creatures which would undoubtedly not include us.
Paul Fussell on The Second World War.
The major pacifists in our society are not churchmen, as you might think. They are the military.
I'm Louis Lapham, and this is Bookmark.
Compelling writers, provocative ideas, good conversation. Watch Bookmark with Louis Lapham.
Monday morning at 11:30. Explore painting, architecture, photography, and sculpture each week with art historian Richard Love and personalities from the American art community. Challenge the Brahmin and investigate the avant-garde with American Art Forum. Tuesday afternoons at 1:30 on WUSF-TV. A service of the University of South Florida, presenting information through educational, public affairs, and how-to programming. WUSF-TV, Tampa, St. Petersburg.
Hi, I'm Norm Abram, and this is the new Yankee Workshop. With today, we're going to build this trestle tape. Graphics make the connections that matter to you and your world. Join us each week for Adam Smith's Money World.
Tomorrow at 1.
Funding for Tracks Ahead is provided in part by the Kalmbach Publishing Company, publishers of classic toy trains, Trains Model Railroader, and Trains Illustrated.
Tracks Ahead introduces the Chicago L system, Wendell Murphy, railroad photographer, Grover Devine's Garden Railroad, and the Cuyahoga Valley and West Shore Model Railroad Club. Hello, I'm Chuck Sainer, and I'd like to welcome you to Tracks Ahead. The Chicago Rapid Transit Lines, or the L system for short, is a combination of 4 independent elevated railroads. It all began in 1892 as the South Side Elevated Railroad. Today, the Rapid Transit Lines of the Chicago Transit Authority operates 215 miles of track and well over 1,300 L cars.
When people come to Chicago from around the world, they want to ride our elevated trains. And people say, well, why? Well, they're fun, and it's the best way to sightsee. The Chicago elevated trains are to our city what the cable cars are to San Francisco or the double-deck buses are to London. But besides that, we carry over 500,000 people a day on these trains. The Chicago Transit Authority is the nation's 3rd largest transit system, carrying over 2 million people a day. Now, on the elevated system alone, we have 143 stations, 215 miles of track, 6 different lines. There's over 2,200 trains a day carrying people back and forth, primarily to downtown. We also have one of the oldest elevated systems in the country, and we have a lot of pride in that heritage also. As you can see by this station, this is our Quincy Wells station on the Loop Elevated, which has been restored to its 1890s appearance. You can note the tile, the woodwork, the sanded floors, the ornate ticket booths, even the old-time advertisements on the outside. The elevated railroads were built to literally go over the tremendous traffic congestion in the streets. The first line was built in 1892, and soon other lines extended to other sides of the city. The trains were originally pulled by steam locomotives, but the smoke and operating problems led to the world's first electric rapid transit trains in 1895. The cars were made of wood and required gatemen, or guards, to stand between them to let people on and off. This interior shot clearly shows where the term strap hanger came from. The L's were built through the already densely populated neighborhoods radiating out from downtown. As they were extended, development soon followed. Ridership climbed steadily through the 1920s. People rode the L everywhere, and funeral cars allowed lifelong riders to exit in style. The State Street Subway, Chicago's first, was built in 1943 to relieve congestion on the Loop Elevated, which has the busiest railroad crossing in the world. When CTA took over the L from private owners in 1947, modernization was in order. Many branches and stations were closed to eliminate duplication and speed service. Hundreds of new cars were built and parking lots constructed so motorists would park and ride. Trains were put in the median of an expressway, a first for the nation. The 1960s saw new growth for the L with the opening of the Skokie Swift, the Dan Ryan and Kennedy Rapid Transit extensions, and rebuilt stations. In recent years, the elevateds have taken on new importance as the city is once again growing in population and development. Extension of the Kennedy line to O'Hare Airport, the through routing of the Howard and Dan Ryan lines, and the new route being built to Midway Airport are all examples of this.
CTA plays a vital role in the economy of this region and has done so for many years, particularly for carrying people to and from work. In fact, in the central area, the downtown of Chicago, 85% of all of the work trips every day are carried by CTA. And this allows the freeway and street system, which is already congested, to not have to deal with all of those trips, which of course would be almost impossible. In addition, not only are work trips carried by CTA, but in the entire service area, 25% of all trips are made on transit. This is for shopping purposes, to visit friends and relatives and so forth. As a matter of fact, even though 75% of all travelers on CTA do have an auto available and are making a choice to use CTA, there's another 25% who have no car. And it's that 25% who are known as transit dependent, who rely on CTA for their main means to get around town. And this is an important social function that's also played by CTA in terms of providing the mobility for those persons.
In the control center, we're standing in one of the 5 sections that monitor the movement of trains and buses. And behind me, you'll see 44 substation cubicles that monitor that distribution through the use of power controllers in conjunction with third rail and traction power on the railroad. The movement of these trains, the ampage and voltage regulated for each power section, is monitored by these power controllers and also denoted by audible alarms on any function on these substation cubicles. Any function that pertains to the movement of a train would come in through this particular section. The power controller has the ability to activate or deactivate the traction power, usually 600 volts, on the third rail of the rapid transit system of Chicago Transit Authority, and also monitor the fans, lighting, DC and AC power in the subways. In the control center, the rail controller monitors the movement of the trains and the CTA system. On these 6 rail routes that the rail controller monitors, he can determine the movement of a train, the interval, the delay, and also has the ability to transmit and receive radio transmissions from all CTA rail employees. The rail controller also has the ability to transmit and make platform announcements to the public on all of our 142 station platform areas. Through the use of pen graphs and charts, the rail controller can determine the movement of a train, its course, a delay, and its interval.
We're now at Rosemont Tower, which is on the O'Hare line near the River Road Station. The purpose of this tower is to control all train movements in and out of Rosemont Yard. Trains have to go in and out of Rosemont Yard because we don't keep the same train lengths all during the day and evening. During the middle of the day, our trains have 2 to 4 cars apiece. In the rush hour, they have 6 to 8 cars apiece. So we store trains here, and we have to take them out for the rush hours and then put them back. Using the panel that you see before her, the tower person controls the movements of all of the switches, enabling a train to go from one track to the other. When the tower person brings a train out of the yard, that's called a put-out. And the tower person brings a train into the yard, that's called a layup. In addition to manipulating the switches so that trains can be taken in and out of the yard, the tower person here can also control the railroad for emergency movements, such as if a track is out of service, or due to maintenance work, they are single tracking.
At the Skokie Shop facility, the authority employs approximately 230 craft people. In addition to craft people, we have a support staff of tech service people and some clerical people that are responsible for procuring material and advising shop personnel and field locations as to procedural bulletins, functions, and items which must be monitored. At this particular facility, we have the capabilities of repainting and rebuilding rail cars. We are capable of doing extensive body work, which would include the change out of floors, body panels, and any other associated parts. We do major works to the electrical components, whether it be the rebuilding of the large components and or the installing of them on the rail cars. Also, an important function of this facility is the rebuilding of all the components which are used there in the rail car. These components are, again, either installed on the vehicle here or distributed to our outlying terminal shops for replacement. These could include the trucks. Every rail car has 2 trucks, each truck consisting of 2 wheel assemblies and 2 motors. These assemblies and the motors are also rebuilt here at this facility. We also have backup departments which assist with the rebuilding, example of which would be our machine shop, our blacksmith shop, our armature room, which would refurbish the armatures for the motor line to then complete the assembly. After units are installed, all rail cars are tested, checked, and then run on our test track.
The future of light rail in Chicago is a bright one. Light rail has been important for many years. The present type of service CTA provides over rail is light rail with smaller vehicles. And in the last few months, proposals for a downtown distributor that would link the commuter rail stations with North Michigan Avenue have been made and are under careful study. And in addition, other proposals to extend the Congress line to Oak Brook, to extend the Skokie Swift to Northbrook have also been made, and these would broaden our service to the growing areas of the region. So these are examples of the fact that light rail is here to stay.
Wendell Murphy of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, has been making 16mm movies of trains since 1970. Wendell's movies really capture the fascination of big-time railroading. Natural sound, color, and narration make these movies fun to watch.
My interest in trains goes back to the time when my uncle was a brass pounder on the New York Central. That would be in 1939, 1940. And then later on I got into model trains and HOs and real trains, and it just kept going that way. I became interested in railroad photography after I had about 10,000 feet of home movies of birthdays and Christmases and whatnot all, and I looked around for something else to get into, and naturally liking trains, it was obvious. I went into 16mm movies for the simple reason that at the time I started, there was no Super 8, there was no video, all we had was regular 8 and 16. And there just was no choice except 16 at that time. I picked a subject usually by a flyer that I received in the mail or an ad in one of the railroad magazines stating that a certain train is going to be or a locomotive is going to be usually a steam engine. That's the biggest factor. Steam engine. The best plan of attack, or what I would say my plan of attack, would be to find out the railroad that it's running on, and then get some topographical maps or any maps that are available on the area that it's going to go through, and then pick out spots along there, and then try to get out there early enough, 2 or 3 days before the actual trip, so that you can check out these spots and maybe find even a better one that's not on them. Originally numbered 844, then renumbered to 8444 when the new GP30s were assigned the 800 series. Those 80-inch drivers are just 4 inches short of being 7 foot high and are powered by 265-pound steam pressure driving 25-inch pistons through a 32-inch stroke. The 8444 was never really retired, although its last non-excursion run was in October 1958 on Train 104, the city of Los Angeles. 8444, the highest numbered of 45 Northerns, was the last new steam engine delivered to the UP, and that was way back to the time of the Big War, 1944. 30 years later, 1974, the 8444 became the only large steam locomotive in the country that had spent more years working on excursions than in regular service. Stop at Green River, the 8444 and the 3985 lean into a curve and climb around the hills at Ragan, Wyoming. Next stop, Evanston. My fondest memory would have to be the time that my son Donald and I were at Sherman Hill waiting for the Union Pacific 4884 to come back from Laramie. And we went up in the morning. It was a real nice, beautiful day. But typically Wyoming, in the afternoon, the clouds came in, sleet came down, and we're all over that place trying to find a slot in those rocks to get in out of the weather. The last surviving GS4, minus their red, orange, and black paint scheme of the famous daylight trains, now wearing the red, white, and blue of the American Freedom Train, heads east from Butler, Wisconsin, crossing over the Milwaukee Road tracks on this 14th day of August, 1975. In a few hours, it will be in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Doyle McCormick and his restoration crew can well be proud of their efforts to recall memories of SP's finest hours, when steam and streamliner were symbols of pride and prestige. The future for this film, I don't have any plans right at the present time. I have kind of looked at tape somewhat, but I'll probably just leave it all to my son and let him worry about it.
Grover Devine of Hayward, California, models a garden railroad in half-inch scale. The locomotives are live steam, radio controlled, and the rolling stock is scratch built. All the track on this garden railroad is hand spiked to individual ties. Landscaping includes Japanese maples and Chinese elms. I think garden railroads are so popular these days because of two main reasons. Number one, this is a new, larger size. You see, these trains are twice the size of the Lionel train. And number two, and I think more important, it's really a family hobby. You see, while I'm working on my trains, which I'm interested in, my wife is outside gardening and planting plants and maintaining the miniature landscape, which she is interested in. If we started our tour in the little village, we'd pick up the train at the small station, which is yet to be built, and proceed down a short straight through a cut of lava stone and across a 200-pound cement arch bridge. We would then go through a miniature forest of conifers and across a scale 180-foot-long wooden trestle. We'd then proceed to some raised bench work because my yard is in 2 levels, and proceed to the railroad yard. This bench work not only helped to keep the railroad level and reduce grades, but it makes possible working on the steam locomotives at chest level rather than on one's hands and knees. These steam engines work the same as a real-size steam engine because they are a steam engine. And they contain water in the boiler. I use distilled water to keep things clean. They take steam oil in the oiler to keep the things inside lubricated, and they need a fire. And in the case of my locomotives, I use butane. I could also use alcohol, which some engines use, or even coal. The throttle and the reversing lever are worked by remote control. There's a little servo, which is a electrically operated arm that takes the place of my hand on the throttle. And it actually moves the valve, which makes the engine go fast or slow or forward or reverse. And that's operated by remote control or radio control. The same type of radio controls that model airplane enthusiasts use for their airplanes, or the four-wheel drive cars that are radio controlled that hobbyists use nowadays. My track is not commercially available track. I assembled this track the same as full-size railroads assemble theirs. First, I prepared a road bed by grading the ground and compacting it, making sure that it was all level and true. And then I placed ties upon it. Now, the ties I made myself by cutting them on my table saw out of redwood, and then laid commercially available rail on top of the ties, spiked it in place. This whole process takes about an hour to do 1 foot of track. It's laborious, but it does make nice-looking track. Then after the track has been spiked in place, I ballast the track to keep the ties from moving around, the same purpose that ballast is used on full-size railroads. Maintaining a garden railroad is the same as maintaining a full-size railroad again. It's repairing washouts after a winter storm, replacing ballast, straightening rail, tightening up rail joiners, and driving back in loose spikes. The garden, it's maintained the same as any miniature garden or bonsai garden.
It needs constant weeding, trimming of the plants, and planting new plants as old ones die or become too large for the garden. Other problems the garden railwayer faces are quite different than what real railroads face. For instance, we have kitty cats that love to dig holes in the garden and make a mess. We also have snails that eat the plants and leave slime all over. And there's ants that love to use the railheads as a highway. Then when the train passes, it smears their bodies all over the track, leaving formic acid, which makes quite a mess of the locomotive works, but it does weather the railheads and make them look realistic. Garden railroading is also very interesting because of the variety of rolling stock available. There's commercial ready-to-run rolling stock, and there's kits available to make your own rolling stock, and one can also build rolling stock from scratch because there's many commercially available parts and castings available to build them up yourself. Like every garden railwayer and every model railroader, my garden railway will never be complete. You see, I've got more rolling stock to build. I'm working on a passenger train right now, complete with baggage car and observation car. I also have more buildings under construction for my village. And as you can see, my engine facilities are not complete. It consists merely of a couple of sidings and a turntable right now. In the future, there'll be a water tank, a station, and an engine shed there. And even though my backyard is pretty full right now, I think I can still squeeze in a trolley line.
The Cuyahoga Valley and West Shore Model Railroad Club in Olmsted Falls, Ohio, is housed in an actual railroad station built in 1887. Built originally for the Lake Shore and Michigan Southern Railroad, this quaint structure was last used by the New York Central System. This fascinating HO scale model railroad features impressive structures as well as great views of scenic Ohio. And today, better than 80 Conrail trains a day pass by this clubhouse.
The Cuyahoga Valley and West Shore Model Railroad Club in Olmsted Falls, Ohio, incorporates two layouts in its building in Olmsted Falls, in an old New York Central passenger station. Our first layout is an old tin plate layout. This is in a room 20 by 20 feet large and shows the beginnings of the model railroad hobby. In our other room, which is 20 feet by 30 feet, we show a contemporary style HO gauge layout with 600 feet of mainline trackage. We also have 200 feet of yard, plus 85 switch machines, which make the whole railroad operational. Our club station, which we're currently in right now, was originally owned by the Lakeshore Michigan Southern Railroad. They moved out in 1954, and the New York Central took over the building and had it until the late 60s, when Penn Central took over. We rented the building from Conrail in 1977 and have been here over 12 years. Currently, we have been doing restoration work on the interior. Plus, we also received a new addition to our building, which is an ex-Pennsylvania Railroad N8 caboose. This was donated to us by the Consolidated Railroad Corporation. On the railroad that we have, we are looking at an area of southern Ohio and eastern Pennsylvania, with slightly rolling hills with not very high mountains. Our railroad runs through a very large yard and some very, very scenic areas. Our most spectacular scene on the layout was created by a gentleman by the name of Dan Dorco and Mike Matthews. It's called the Dorco Mine Complex. And Dan Dorco, the man behind it, spent hours and hours of time putting this area together to make it look spectacular. The interesting structures, the gazebo and the sawmill, are built by a member by the name of Mark Schreiber. Mark is an expert at building and detailing structures. He detailed the gazebo to incorporate a little bit of everything, with the exception of the sound of the band playing. The band is there on the gazebo. To be a club member in this club, we have full access to our building 24 hours of the day. We have our own facilities that we would need to be able to work in here. Plus, we have a busy main line that we can watch trains if we are just coming out to enjoy ourselves and relax and get away from the busy world. Our operation currently in the HO area is a sort of a test operation, a test bed situation. We're not really sure what type of throttle systems we would like to use yet. So we have been experimenting with different types of throttles and cab control to run our railroad. Our club members like to bring in different types of rolling stock and motive power to run from the different railroads. We see different railroads operating on our layout from the Southern Railroad, the Chesapeake in Ohio, the Baltimore in Ohio, and my favorite, the Southern Railroad. It makes for an interesting piece of operation also when the freelance modelers come in and bring in railroads and short line pieces of equipment that have not been seen. The advice that I would give to any member or anyone that is interested in starting a club is to look at your members or look at the prospective members. If they have a talent and they show you a talent, develop it. Let them develop the talent. There are people out there with excellent talents. Let them develop that talent that is there. Don't let them hide it. If there's no talent, then that person is not needed in a club. But if you have people with talent, let them develop it and show it and be proud of it. And don't rip it out if they try, because that causes a total rip of a club, and it really hurts. I'd much rather see groups that are starting to have fellowship and to work together as a team, not as a bunch of individuals who don't know where they're going. It makes a lot easier to be able to put a complete club together and have enjoyment and fellowship of operation.
Well, that's it. And I hope to see you next time on Tracks Ahead, when once again we'll take a look at the color, excitement, and history of America's railroads.
Funding for Tracks Ahead is provided in part by the Kalmbach Publishing Company, publishers of classic toy trains, Trains Model Railroader, and Trains Illustrated.
Hi, I'm George Page. Next time on Nature, these monkeys living on a tiny island off the coast of Puerto Rico share with us some of the intimate secrets of their lives. Join us for a warm, revealing, and charming film about the monkeys of Monkey Island.
Tonight at 7.
Hi, I'm Steve Thomas. Welcome to This Old House. Have a look at our first project for this season. It's what's known here in New England as a triple-decker. Now, one of the things we'll be showing you is how best to remove lead paint. And we'll also be taking you on a fascinating trip to Japan to see the very latest in factory-built housing. All that and more on This Old House, right here on PBS.
Tomorrow at 5:30 on Channel 16.
Hello, I'm John Davis, inviting you to join us for the next Motor Week 91, when you'll see Mercury's latest try at selling small sedans, the Tracer LTS. Lisa Barrow's FYI report on the best used sports car buys. A preview of Chrysler products for 1991. A Pat Goss analysis of one of your car problems. And all the latest motor news. So don't miss the next Motor Week 91.
Tomorrow at 6. A service of the University of South Florida.